Hey guys, welcome back to the Biblical Passages Podcast, where biblical wisdom meets real life application. That's what we're trying to do here. So we're so glad you're here with us today. Whether you're driving, from work to work, you're cleaning your house, you're getting ready, you're just trying to cope with all the kids running around, wherever you're at, I hope that you can pull up a seat, carve out this time with us. And, Eric, today we're really going to be talking about something that I think is going to hit people a lot differently than what they expect.
Mhm.
We're going to be discussing the power of anguish.
Powerful.
Oh, that word just hurts my heart.
Yes. Okay.
It's a
Yes.
deep, deep word. Anytime that I've heard anguish, it's always been all I can think of is despair. I heard this one woman teach on English. Her name's Brene Brown, and she likes to show pictures to describe things,
Mm.
to describe words, rather. And she showed this picture of this sheep, and it's like a mother sheep over this baby sheep that apparently the baby sheep is passed. And
Mhm.
the mother's standing over it, and there are all these crows and vultures just surrounding. And you see this mother sheep just looking like she is in anguish. Her head
Mhm.
is looking towards the sky. She looks like she's making a noise, and it is just heartbreaking. And I feel that we all have felt that way at some points in our lives where
Mhm.
anguish has just overtaken us.
I agree. Yeah.
So I guess as we kind of dive into our podcast here, Eric, have you ever heard something or, I love to ask these questions to our audience. Have you ever heard something that has just wrecked you? And I say wrecked you in a form of, I feel like women, when we get wrecked per se, we are maybe sometimes hysterical, maybe emotional, maybe crying or upset. And, Eric, what does it look like on the male side when a male gets per se wrecked, like a woman would say?
Well, typically he'll use his analytical filters versus his emotional filters,
So
and
what
he'll
does that
make
look like on the outside?
it. What it looks like is there's a wound that comes, and then there's a message that's decoded, and then a vow is made. Like if there is if there's been something like a wound that comes from a father figure or from a male that they trusted, and then they'll decode that as to say, okay, here's the message that I'm supposed to receive, and I'll make a vow I'll never trust a man again. And unfortunately, that then spills over into sometimes I'll never trust God again. Okay,
Mm.
and so they develop an alienation toward their relationship with their Father in heaven. So, um,
So a male being wrecked per se might just look like quiet or silence, or maybe not something as emotional as maybe a woman would look like. But
right,
nevertheless, have you ever felt something that has just absolutely shaken you, that's wrecked you, that's brought you to your core? Something where, maybe it's about someone you love, or a situation, a community, everyone else around you is just like, okay, have a good day. That reminds me of one of my friends. She lost a baby, and about a year after she lost a baby, she made this comment to me, and she said, Brittany, it was like the world just moved on. I went through
mm,
the hardest time in my life. I lost something so close and so dear to me, and a couple months later the world just forgot. And that's what I'm kind of feeling here today is, what's that point in time where you feel like the world's just forgot, but you couldn't move on? And I feel like there's times in the Bible that we can lean on and go, huh, where are
yes,
times where they felt this anguish before?
yes, the Bible does speak to moments like this and conditions like this, and the Lord is deeply compassionate over that. But today we're talking, as you said, it's about the power of anguish, because anguish will move God's heart. So it's not just like we burned the burgers at the Memorial Day picnic, and so that we
Hmm.
were upset about that. This is deep anguish that we're talking about, and how we have four examples. I think that he can. One of them is how Jesus suffered himself the night before his execution, and even on the cross. I think you have a
Mm.
passage in Isaiah that if Isaiah 53 that you have set up.
Yeah, Isaiah 53:5, it says, but he was wounded for our transgressions, he was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and by his stripes we are healed. This was Jesus. This was that deep, personal, just I can't even imagine anguish that deep. I can't
Yeah.
imagine dying for somebody
And that's
else.
700 years in advance. Isaiah is prophesying this. But
Mm.
then it was actually fulfilled the night before his execution in the Garden of Gethsemane. There's a passage in Luke 22. Can you read that for us?
Yeah, in Luke 22:44, it says, and being in agony, he prayed more earnestly. Then his sweat became like great drops of blood falling down to the ground.
Can you imagine?
Man, I cannot.
Can you
I
imagine
cannot
being in
imagine.
such anguish that you don't sweat water, you sweat blood? Okay,
No.
that, that
I thought that that was absolutely impossible, and that this was just kind of like a representation for how much anguish Jesus was in, but it's an actual scientific condition
hmm
that being in so much anguish, you can sweat droplets of blood. That is absolutely mind-blowing to me that he was in so much distress.
hmm
I've been in distress, but I've not been in that much distress. But
hmm
also, Eric, this is Jesus. Like, let's be real. This is Jesus.
Yeah, he's
Jesus is
special.
he's special. He's doing all the things when he's in anguish. He's just like, yo, Heavenly Father, give me some peace, right? Like, they're directly connected.
Right.
So, are there any people in the Bible that suffered, this anguish and it wasn't Jesus?
That's a good question. It's a good solid question. One is Paul. Paul was
Mm,
one that persecuted the early church, and then, of
right?
course, became a born again believer when he was knocked off down to the ground and by Jesus. Why do you persecute me? But he wrote in Romans 9 that he wrote of his great sorrow and unceasing anguish. Unceasing. Can you imagine?
Mm,
Unceasing anguish in his heart for the salvation of his own people. So that's Romans 9:2. So that's a quick one, but Paul didn't get a break just because he had such deep revelation. The Lord's allowed him to suffer greatly in so many different ways, shipwrecks and persecutions and beatings and prison. He suffered deeply. But let's move on from there. There's an Old Testament story that,
yeah.
my gosh, about Hannah.
Yeah, because Paul, I mean, he makes me feel better about my life, but I mean, he almost makes me feel worse too. Can we get somebody
Mm,
in the
mm,
middle of the road? Okay, let's go. Let's go with Hannah, right? So Hannah in the Bible, we know that. Oh man, she was a very powerful example of faith and surrender, really. So, if you don't know the story of Hannah, she was a woman who desperately wanted a child, but she couldn't conceive.
mm,
During that time, she was constantly mocked by Penina, who was the other wife of her husband. So, that was normal to have more than one wife. So, she was mocked because she couldn't have kids. And if you couldn't have kids back then, like,
mm-hmm.
you were essentially useless,
Yes,
right? Like,
correct. Yeah.
there was no point. But instead of turning away from God, Hannah, she faced heartbreak like head on.
Mm-hmm.
This girl went straight to the temple and she was in so much anguish that
Mm-hmm.
the priest thought she was drunk.
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
talking
It says that in the Bible.
crying out to God. Yes.
Yes.
That is so beautiful though, to that other people, well, I think it's a little worrisome, honestly, when you're in the place where you should be able to let out all your tears, all your sadness, and you get judged instead of
Yes.
loved.
Yes. Thank you. Yes. That's a good
That's
word.
painful.
That's a good word. That's a good word.
That's what
Yeah.
she was walking away from Penina, and she walked straight into a temple where she was supposed to be held and loved, and she was judged.
Yes. And in verse 12, as she continued praying before the Lord, Eli watched her mouth. Eli was the high priest.
Hmm.
Eli watched her mouth. Now, Hannah spoke in her heart, only her lips moved. This is in the Bible. We're not just writing a Hollywood script. This is actually in the Bible. Only her lips moved, but her voice was not heard.
Mm.
Therefore, Eli thought she was drunk. Says in verse 13. So Eli said to her, how long will you be drunk? Put your wine away from you. Again, the judgmental attitude, like you just said. But Hannah answered and said, no, my Lord, I am a woman of shoot. You see that? of sorrowful
Mm.
spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor intoxicating drink, but have poured out my soul before the Lord.
Mm.
Come on. There's terms for this. If you want change, look at her. She poured out her soul
Poured
before the
out my
Lord.
soul.
My gosh. Do not consider your maidservant a wicked woman, for out of the abundance of my complaint and grief I have spoken until now.
Mm.
That's humility. That's transparency. Then Eli answered and said, "Go in peace." And to his credit, he changed. He believed her. And the God of Israel grant your petition, which you have asked of him. So he brought his station of the high priest station as a blessing to her. And she
Mm-hmm.
said, "Let your maidservant find favor in your sight." So the woman went her way and ate, and her face was no longer sad. Okay.
Man, God gave her a son though after
Well,
that.
yeah, but look at verse 20. This ties back into our previous podcast where we said that there are no clocks in heaven.
Oh,
Things
yes.
happen what?
In the process of
In the
time.
process of time. And that's what verse 20 says. So I think this is where, because we're called biblical passages, we're willing to stop and take note of that little phrase. So came to pass in the process of time that Hannah conceived and what?
Bore a son.
That was what she got, a bore son, and called his name Samuel, saying, "Because I have asked for him from the Lord." And so eventually she dedicates that son after he's been weaned, dedicates him and brings him to the temple to actually live. Can you imagine? After anguish for the son, she raises him for a few years and then turns him over to Eli and says, "You raise him from this point forward." And she would take up every year. She would take up a new a little new coat for him, and so I'm the woman. They she said, "Oh my Lord, as your soul lives, my Lord, I am the woman who stood by you here, praying to the Lord. For this child I prayed, and the Lord granted me my petition, which I asked of him." Okay, and lo and behold, the Lord gave her a reward. Do you want to tell us what that was?
So I'm excited about this because I was asking all these questions beforehand of why would you want to just have a kid in order to be able to give him up? And I just don't understand. But eventually God rewarded her. And in 1 Samuel 2:21, it says, "And the Lord visited Hannah so that she conceived and bore 3 sons
Three
and
more sons,
2 daughters.
5 more children.
Meanwhile, the child Samuel grew before the Lord. Because of her sacrifice, she
Mm-hmm.
was blessed greatly."
My goodness.
That is so beautiful. But I can't imagine that her knowing that in that moment of anguish, that her being in the temple, trying to get away from people being so mean to her, coming to the temple, having someone hurt her feelings there of like, oh, well, you must be drunk. Stop being like that. And
Mm-hmm.
her just being in this anguish. I can't imagine that in that moment she could have ever thought that she would be blessed the way she was blessed afterwards. But that just goes to the Bible saying that he will do abundantly more than we could ever think, ask, or imagine.
Yes. Amen. My gosh.
Oh, such a good
So
God.
something about anguish as we're learning here between Paul, Jesus, and Hannah, and we're about to get into our fourth individual. But there's a purity of heart that
Mm,
exposes that before God. And the Bible says the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth. For what purpose? To show himself strong on the behalf of those whose hearts are perfect toward him.
mm,
So he wants to show himself strong. His eyes run to and fro. I remember one time being in prayer with the Lord saying, "Why do your eyes have to run to and fro? You're God. You can see everything." He said to me, "You think it's easy?
mm,
You think it's easy to find people who are pure in heart?" And
mm,
so I just made an assumption, but apparently it's not as easy. It's not as simple as that. So when we read these stories, Hannah, Paul, Jesus, there was a purity of heart that these people had, and the Lord noticed it. And their stories are recorded in the Bible because of this. In Hannah's case, she had 5 more children.
That
And,
is
Sam, and
beautiful. I'm
Samuel
glad
went
you
on to change history. I mean, he's the one that anointed, first of all, to give Saul his credibility as
mhm.
the first king, but then David. So this guy had a great purpose in human history and biblical history.
Right. You said something though that struck me a couple different ways. One, anguish reveals someone's heart.
Hmm.
I'm just thinking of like people that are aggravated at each other, and then all of a sudden someone gets sick, and you hear that, you have a restored relationship all of a sudden. It's because that anguish, that sadness, that what if moment happens to where it
Hmm.
brings you back to reality of how important things are. It really does wipe away everything from your heart. Anguish gets down to the bone. And two, listening to what you were saying, it seems to me, Eric, that anguish is almost one of those conditions that moves God's heart.
I think that's well said. It's it 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 certainly has an impact because he writes in the Bible in Chronicles, if my people, there's six conditions, if
Mm,
my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways. That's six little clauses there when you really stop and break it down like we like to do. So if
mhm.
my people called by my name will humble themselves. Oh, I don't like to humble myself. That's I like to be prideful. This is America. We you know we we don't humble ourselves. No, we threw off a king. I want to be my own
I
man.
want to be king.
I want to be king. There you go. Will humble
Oh
themselves and
my.
pray. This is a prayer of anguish and seek my face. In other words, Lord, I'm really looking for you. I'm not looking for some university professor to give me answers. I'm not looking for social media culture to give me answers. Okay, that we're in dispute here with that. So the culture wants to build up a viral moment and have you believe that. And God says, no, that's not my way of doing things. Humble yourself, pray, seek my face, and turn from your wicked ways. That's repentance. Okay.
Mm,
Then will I hear from heaven, heal their land. This is there are benefits from that.
yeah.
Okay. I tell you what, this is deep. This is deep.
It is.
Okay.
So we've talked about anguish. We've definitely talked about a couple people in the Bible, definitely Jesus, who I
Mm-hmm.
feel like there is no comparison. He is living on
Mm-hmm.
his own life there.
Yeah.
We have Paul the Apostle, who, okay, I'm getting a little closer. I still feel like it's a bit intense. Hannah, that definitely touches my heart because I've definitely been
Mm-hmm.
to a point in my life where I felt anguish. I've gone into the church looking for help
Mm-hmm.
and only to be judged
Whoa,
and
really?
felt like it was, something that I shouldn't come there for. Oh yes, I was one of the not teen, I was 20 at the time, but I was pregnant and not married and went into a church. And when you see everybody look at you, because I was Southern Baptist,
Oh
so
dear.
very
Okay.
intense. And when you see everybody look at you and oh, the first question they ask, are you engaged? Are you married? Like, you obviously see my big belly here. Come on, people, But I felt that. So that rings a little closer to home. But I feel
Mm-hmm.
like there's another character in the Bible that, we read about. I know you brought him up recently, and I
Mm-hmm.
think we should really dive into him. And that would be Nehemiah. And I don't
Who?
feel like yeah, right? Like I didn't hear about him in school. Nobody ever made a big deal about him.
Right.
But he was one of those people that was absolutely full of anguish, and we get to see God move. Why is there this whole book though on Nehemiah? Why was he so impressive,
Yeah.
Eric?
Well, he built a wall around Jerusalem
Oh,
in just 52 days. Doesn't that impress you?
I mean, building a wall. That sounds a little boring. Is there more?
That's right. That's right. I wanted to do this. Yeah. But here's the thing. He was in exile, um, in 1,000 miles away from Jerusalem,
Mm,
and he was the cupbearer to the king, which is a very
okay.
trusted position. But some of his fellow countrymen came to visit him, and gave him a report about the conditions in Jerusalem. Walls broken down, people in distress, no good civic structure. Yeah, when he heard this, he broke down. Okay, because Zerubbabel had come back in to build a temple. Ezra had come in to run the temple and lead the temple as a high priest, but there was no civic structure. And back then, if you didn't have walls around your city, you were nobody. You were subject to attack and exploitation. And there were 3 governors around that area that were just taking advantage of the people and just not to be trusted, and just diabolical people. Okay. So when Nehemiah hears the story about what's going on, he does 5 things. Okay. And it says in Nehemiah 1:4 what he does. You want to read that?
Well, yes, I do want to read it, but I have a couple questions.
Oh, excuse me.
Okay. I'm very excited right now.
Whoa.
Okay. So first things first, Nehemiah, you said he was born in exile. So he never knew anything outside of this. He never knew a free place. He never knew wonderful and happy, but yet his friends come and tell him about what's been happening this whole time anyways.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden his heart is moved. That just makes me think of me when I was young. I was like probably 14, 15 years old. My heart was moved for pregnant teens and abortions. Like,
oh my.
I did every speech in class you could possibly do on abortions to educate people. I wanted to be a therapist for girls that were looking to have abortions at that age. Like, my heart was moved for it, but I couldn't understand why. I'd never been in that position before, right?
See.
And
Good point.
Nehemiah has never been in that position before. All he's known is the days he's living. All I knew were the days I was living. But yet your heart is moved. It makes me wonder if we sit and think about the way that our heart is moved for different things in our lives, how we should be pursuing that and not just, oh, well, I can do nothing about that. And, I live my own life over here. It's like, what's God trying to move your heart about?
Mm-hmm. Good point. That's a great story. Yeah, Nehemiah was moved. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, Nehemiah was moved, just like you said, even though he'd never been to Jerusalem. But he was moved. Why? Because he knew the conditions. Prophet after prophet had come in and warned the kings. The kings cycled: good king, bad king, good king, bad king. And these prophets came in and warned and warned and warned because they were following idols. It was terrible. It was wicked. And they kept saying, God's going to judge you. God's going to judge you. And eventually the Lord rose up the Assyrians, the Babylonians, to come in and conquer his own land, his Israel, and then Judah. And these exiles went into captivity, and there was the country was gone. The one that had been promised, and to Moses and even previous to that, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Your children will be as the stars in the sky and the sands on the beach. Where are they now? What's going on? So Nehemiah has this heartbreaking experience. Heartbroken. His heart was broken over this condition, and that's extraordinary to me. He just hears a story that he kind of probably peripherally knew about what was going on in Jerusalem, but when he's told this story from his fellow countrymen about the conditions in Jerusalem, he's moved instantly. And if we take a look at those, Nehemiah 1:4, there were 5 things that he did.
So Nehemiah 1:4 says, so it was when I heard these words that I sat down and wept.
1. I just want to go slowly. The passages, right? That's who we are.
Yeah.
You're just bursting through.
Pay attention.
Yeah. He sat down. Okay. Then what else?
He wept.
That's 2.
And mourned.
That's 3.
For many days.
Okay. That's
many
right.
days.
Many days. There you go.
It says I was fasting.
That's 4.
And praying.
There you go.
Before the God of heaven.
My goodness. There's 5 things. You say, well, okay, wait a minute. What about sat down? Is that a big deal? Stand up, sit down? Yes. When you look in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus sat down, and then he drew his disciples to him. Okay, and he started doing the Sermon on the Mount.
Mm-hmm.
When we look at we did Psalm 1. Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor
Or
sits in the.
sitteth.
Okay, right. So when we the sit down indicates I I'm with you guys. I'm
Mm-hmm.
part of you. So here he is. He's sitting down to demonstrate his brokenness, his how he this matters to him. Okay, heard these words. I sat down, and he wept and he mourned. What did Jesus say in the Beatitudes? Blessed are those that mourn; they shall be comforted. So he is
Mm-hmm.
mourning. It says right here for many days, not just superficial 10-minute tears. Oh Lord, you know, my I
Right.
blew a tire and I don't have the money for a spare tire. Oh Lord, can you help me? Okay, these 10-minute prayers. No, that's not
Yeah.
what happened. But for many days, and he was fasting, denying food to his body, which is a form of bringing your body into subjection and praying before the God of heaven. So anyway, I just wanted to point out he did 5 things to indicate his anguish.
Mm. That's what we should be doing every time we have an issue happen. But okay. So we live in a world today where everyone's busy, we're all overwhelmed, we spend a lot of energy doing so many things, but we always try to feel, less burdened, less anxious, less emotionally weighed down. But when we look at Nehemiah here, his story actually starts with him feeling more burdened, more broken, more wrecked. And it wasn't even his problem to fix, Eric. That's what I think is interesting, is that he didn't
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't even his.
Oh,
He's
that's
taking on the weight of other people's issues. And in this world right now on social media, everything is, if I don't want it, it's not for me. And I'm not taking on more than I have to. And it's my way or the highway. And it's never step in and help somebody else.
mm-hmm.
We don't
Interesting.
see that.
Okay, well, when you say everyone is busy and overwhelmed and spending of energy, there are times when people keep themselves busy as a deliberate distraction so that they don't have
Mm-hmm.
to feel anything. Okay, so they're just occupied with one thing after another in order that they don't have to pay attention to something that would matter otherwise. So, but the Lord lets Nehemiah hear this report, and it turns out that he works for a really powerful king. And as we get deeper into the story, maybe that'll be a part 2 for this. We will see that king can respond to Nehemiah's heart cry. But again, I think it was the Lord seeing the purity of Nehemiah's heart. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Okay. And so again, the eyes of the Lord are doing what? Running back and forth for looking for who? Those whose hearts are perfect toward him. Is that, oh, Eric, perfect behavior? I can't have perfect behavior because then, no, not perfect behavior, perfect heart. That my
Mm-hmm.
motives, my intentions are good. Not that my behavior is perfect. That's where people get confused, and they think, and even so-called religious people, as you said, you walked into a church and you were immediately judged. So
Mm-hmm.
that's quite a story. I'm so sorry that happened, but you were looking for comfort and empathy and spiritual solace, but you didn't get it.
Yes. No, thank you. It's okay because it showed me in those moments how other people needed to be treated. And so I've been able to
Wow.
emulate that. And that's been a lot of fun, really, the way that God's healed my heart through that. But with Nehemiah here,
Mm-hmm.
he's not really, I wouldn't think that Nehemiah would be the most obvious person to pick. Like, wouldn't you think that there are like leaders and people that are well, involved and have people,
Yes.
excuse me, already behind them and ready to go? And like, this guy's just a cupbearer to the king.
Yes, he is. But And I started writing frankly, a book about this called The Prayer of Nehemiah. He has a prayer in the opening passages of his book. It's about 250 words, plus or minus, depending on what version you're looking at.
Mhm.
And I started writing a book called The Prayer of Nehemiah. And one day I remember going down to a local bookstore back when they had bookstores. Remember them?
Not
And 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 I was searching through the spiritual section and came to a section about the prayer of different prayers that were done. Remember the story, the book,
Mhm.
the prayer of Jabez, a very popular one. And then I'm flipping through these books and I see a little book called The Prayer of Nehemiah. And I
Mhm.
still to this day remember how discouraged I felt because I thought, oh my goodness, this book has already been written. And I came home and I remember just sitting down on my couch, just praying to God, very discouraged. And I said, why would you have me write a book that no one's going to read?
Mm.
Seems foolish. What a waste of time. And the Lord said, I'm not having you write that book because people will read it. I'm having you write the book because I'm building a Nehemiah spirit in you. And I was
Mm.
double ashamed, okay, because I was sitting there trying to use my analytical ability to determine why the Lord had given me an assignment. And we just got to be careful about that. So where we start using our intellect, our analysis to try, or even our emotions, as you've been saying here today, to try to understand the Lord's um, his principles, his motives, his plans, his strategies. We just got to be careful. We're just not as smart as him, and we just think we know. We think we know, but
Right.
that's not appropriate. So he is Nehemiah had an interesting story, which we'll have to get into maybe in another episode. But it is I love this guy because he was just a nobody. And most of the people that listen to us, they don't have huge credentials, and they're not some professor at some seminary, and they're not some pastor of a mega church. They're just good, regular, honest people. But they
Mhm.
do have a calling. God does have. They are a citizen of the kingdom of heaven, and they do have ambassador credentials, where the Lord wants them to be of influence and wherever they are. And that's what Nehemiah did. He became a man of great influence because he did rebuild that wall eventually. The story is incredible, but he did rebuild that wall around Jerusalem in just 52 days.
I think we all are Nehemiah to a point because we all are called. We all don't feel like we're the most obvious person for any situation typically, but we're all called to do big things for God. But the most important thing that I think could happen or did happen was his response. Like we can all be called and look at it and go, this is too big. This is too much. I won't make an impact. There's no way that this can happen. And we
Yeah.
can stop and ignore it. But the five things that Nehemiah did, he set down. That means he didn't rage out. He didn't lose his mind. He didn't tell God, what are
Mm-hmm.
you doing? He didn't spiral. He stopped and he goes, no, okay, there's something going on here. He
Yeah.
wept, so he let himself feel it. This was real grief. This wasn't
Mm-hmm.
like a performance for everybody else. This
Mm-hmm.
was, I am deeply pained. I don't
Yes.
care if I'm not supposed to cry. I don't care what the social status norms are. I am hurt, and I am going to let you know that I am hurt.
Yes.
He mourned this I think that mourning, people don't even talk about mourning anymore because we just want to get over things so quickly and process them to move on. But he mourned. This wasn't just a moment. This wasn't a time that passed that went away very quickly. He had to sit in it. And sometimes when we sit in it, we think, okay, this isn't right. This isn't where we should be. But he needed all of this to get to where he was supposed to get.
Mm-hmm.
Then he fasted.
Mm-hmm.
So he brought his body into submission. He
Yes.
decided, we're going spiritual on this. You know what? Yeah, I'm sitting here, I'm weeping, I'm crying out to God, but now I'm going to break you. You're not going to break me. I'm going to break you. And he's breaking the spiritual part. He's giving his
Mm-hmm.
body up for submission, just like
Mm-hmm.
Jesus gave his body up. And he prayed. So even after all that, it's like you're almost laying on the ground before God going,
Mm-hmm.
take it all.
Yeah.
What can you do with me? Here I am.
Yes.
I think that's a beautiful depiction of exactly what Nehemiah did.
Yes. And as you were talking, I don't know that we're all called to something big and huge and mighty, because it might just seem small. But if we do it, we should do it on faith. That we might examine intellectually, gee, I don't have the resources, I don't have the education, I don't have the money, I don't have the contacts. And that's us operating by analysis and intellect and in some evaluation. But when we walk by faith and not by sight, then the Lord says, I can multiply that. If I could take the faith of a mustard seed and I can
Mm,
multiply it 30, 60, 100-fold times, Jesus said. That's kingdom economics. And when
yes.
we get into that, that's an exciting topic by itself. That again, avoid the logic, avoid the earthbound way of running economics, and say, oh, that I need to have the money, I need to have the education, I need to have the contacts. That's just that's the cursed economy. Let's go
Right.
all the way to the kingdom economy, and that's what Nehemiah did. He just followed the Lord's guidance, and as we get into the next part of the story, when he goes to the king and expresses why he's feeling sad, and the king resources him. Amazing story, just amazing, out of thin
Right.
air.
Yeah, so we're definitely going to go into that within our next episode. I think this one, the main things that I find to be important is that I think a lot of us walk around with maybe unprocessed burdens or things that we feel deeply, but we never actually sit with them like Nehemiah did. Maybe we just keep moving, and then we wonder, why do we feel disconnected? Why do we have no purpose? What's going on? It's because we're not willing to sit with them, to fast, to
Mm-hmm.
hear what God is trying to say to us in those moments. And a lot of the times, God has already positioned us before we even know what his
Yes.
calling is. Uh, he will shift and move things in our lives and make a way. And we don't, we're just over here. I swear, sometimes we're just over here like little ants, just going back and forth. And we're not even paying attention to
Okay.
what God is telling us to do.
Okay. Well, this has been a again. I know you gave us the title at the beginning, "The Power of Anguish," and it has a way of moving the heart of God. It has a way of expressing the depth of our conviction. And there are some stories here between Hannah, Paul, and Nehemiah, and there are more. I would love for people to go search out other examples that they find in the Bible that they say, well, that's another story of anguish. Great, go search it out and see what you can learn from that. And I'm not saying everybody manufactures anguish. That's silly. But what they should do is look for legitimate stories of this and how it not only expressed the deep feelings of their heart, but also it moved the heart of God.
Yeah.
So,
In closing, I would say we'd want to reflect, what have you been trying to shake? Maybe God's asking you to sit with it instead and, absorb that moment, see what he's trying to say. But next week, we're going to kind of dive into what Nehemiah actually does with that burden because he didn't just feel it, he takes it somewhere specific.
mm-hmm,
And, God moves in the most powerful example of his prayer there.
mm-hmm,
So we're going to
mm-hmm.
go through those verses and see the way God moves. But
Amen.
thank you for spending time with us today, going through Nehemiah, and I look forward
Yes.
to actually diving into Nehemiah a little bit more next week.
Great. Thank you.
Till next time.